Hello, I am Mike.
Hello, I am Lily. Welcome to English Podcast Flow.
Today we're going to be talking about something that I think a lot of us struggle with,
Yeah,
and that's the power of saying no. You know,
absolutely.
it's so hard to turn down requests, whether it's from friends or family or colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
but learning to say no effectively can really transform your life.
Yeah,
It can lead to less stress, more time for yourself,
absolutely.
and a better focus on what really matters to you.
It's so true. Saying no can be incredibly empowering,
Right.
but I totally get why so many people find it difficult.
Yeah. So let's unpack this a bit.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard for people to say no in the first place?
Well,
What are some of the underlying reasons?
it appears that a lot of us have a hard time saying no because we're afraid of hurting others' feelings or being disliked.
Mm-hmm.
We worry about disappointing people or damaging relationships, and
Yeah.
honestly, that's completely understandable. We're social beings.
Yeah.
Connection is important to us.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But if we're constantly saying yes to everything,
Yeah.
doesn't that eventually take a toll on us? I mean, we can't
Mhm.
possibly do it all right.
You're absolutely right. Studies show that always saying yes can lead to exhaustion, stress, and even resentment.
Yeah.
It's like we're stretching ourselves too thin, trying to please everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, we end up sacrificing our own well-being. It's essential to recognize that saying no is not a selfish act.
Right.
It's about setting healthy boundaries and prioritizing your own needs.
So it's really about self-care in a way, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's about recognizing that it's okay to put yourself first sometimes.
absolutely.
But how do we get past that feeling that we're being rude or letting people down when we say no?
That's a great question. It appears that a lot of the guilt we feel comes from the way we perceive the act of saying no.
Okay.
Instead of viewing it as a negative action, a rejection, we need to reframe it as a positive choice.
Mm-hmm.
A choice that allows us to protect our time and energy, which ultimately enables us to show up more fully
Right.
for the things and people that truly matter to us.
I love that. A positive choice. That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
So in what situations would you say it's particularly important to exercise this power of no?
One clear instance is when something makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
If a request or situation doesn't sit right with you, it's perfectly okay to decline.
Yeah.
Trust your gut feeling.
Right.
It's usually a good indicator that something isn't quite right.
Our intuition can be pretty powerful, that's for sure. What are some other situations where saying no would be beneficial?
Another important time to say no is when your schedule is already full.
Mm-hmm.
We all have limited time and energy.
Yeah.
And it's essential to protect those resources.
Right.
Trying to cram too much into our day only leads to burnout in the end.
Yeah.
And then we're not really able to give our best to anything.
That's such a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the go, go, go mentality
Yeah.
and forget that we need to recharge and take breaks.
Right.
And what about requests that just don't align with our goals or values?
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that's another time when saying no is crucial.
Absolutely. Saying yes to things that distract you from your priorities will only hinder your progress in the long run.
Right.
It's like that saying, you can do anything but not everything.
Yeah.
Choosing to say no in these situations actually empowers you to focus on what truly matters
Okay.
and make progress toward your goals.
So if we embrace saying no more often, how does that actually translate into having more control over our lives?
When you say no to things that drain your time and energy, you create space for the things that truly matter to you.
Mm.
You gain the freedom to make conscious choices about how you spend your time,
Right.
rather than feeling like you're constantly reacting to the demands of others.
That sense of control can have a ripple effect on other areas of our lives.
Right.
It can reduce stress levels, boost our confidence,
Absolutely.
even improve our relationships. I imagine it takes a lot of pressure off when we're not constantly overcommitting ourselves.
Exactly. When we're not constantly stretched thin,
Yeah.
we have more energy to devote to our passions, our loved ones, and even our own self-care. Right.
And that can lead to a more balanced and fulfilling life overall.
It sounds like saying no can really be a key to unlocking a happier and healthier life.
You can.
But let's get practical for a moment. How do we actually go about saying no in a way that's both effective and respectful?
Yeah.
I imagine there's a bit of an art to it.
You're absolutely right. The way we say no can make a big difference.
Mhm.
It's all about finding the right balance between being assertive and being kind.
Yeah, okay.
We want to be clear about our boundaries without coming across as harsh or dismissive.
So it's not just about blurting out no.
Right.
It's about being thoughtful in our approach.
Yeah.
Can you give us some tips on how to do that?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
One helpful tip is to start by acknowledging the request
Okay.
and expressing appreciation for the person thinking of you.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just saying a flat no, you could say something like, I appreciate you asking, but.
Right.
That simple acknowledgement goes a long way in softening the message.
And maintaining a positive rapport, it shows that you're not rejecting the person,
Right.
but simply declining the request.
That's a subtle but important distinction.
Yeah.
And I imagine the tone of voice and body language also play a role, right?
Absolutely. It's all about being genuine and respectful in your delivery.
Okay.
You don't need to over-explain or make excuses.
Right.
A simple, polite no delivered with sincerity is often enough.
But what about those situations where it feels extra hard to say no, like in professional settings? I imagine those can be particularly tricky to navigate.
You're right. Those can be challenging. It can be especially tough to decline requests from colleagues or superiors.
Yeah,
But remember, your time and expertise are valuable, and it's okay to set boundaries.
right.
It's not about being difficult. It's about being realistic about your capacity and protecting your own well-being.
So how do we go about saying no in a professional context without jeopardizing our relationships or career prospects?
Right.
What are some phrases we could use?
If you're already overloaded with work and someone asks you to take on another project, you could say something like, I wish I could help, but I'm already at capacity right now.
Okay.
Or if the request falls outside of your job description,
Yeah.
you could politely decline and perhaps suggest someone who might be a better fit.
Those are great examples. It's about being assertive but respectful
Exactly.
and making it clear that you're not simply brushing them off.
Right.
Now, I imagine things can get even more complicated when it comes to saying no in our personal relationships. It can be so hard to disappoint our loved ones, especially when they're asking for our support.
You're absolutely right. Personal relationships can be the most challenging when it comes to saying no.
Right.
We naturally want to support our friends and family, but it's crucial to remember that we can't be everything to everyone.
Right.
We have to prioritize our own well-being so that we can show up as our best selves. For those we care about, sometimes saying no is actually the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for others.
I think that's a really important point. It's not selfish to set boundaries. It's actually a way of preserving those relationships.
Yeah.
And making sure we don't end up feeling resentful or burned out.
Right.
But how do we navigate those conversations, especially when it comes to family members who might not be used to us saying no?
It does require a bit of finesse and open communication.
Okay.
If a friend asks for a favor that you're not comfortable with or that you simply don't have time for, it's okay to say, I appreciate you asking, but I can't do that right now.
Right.
And true friends will understand a healthy relationship involves respecting each other's boundaries and limitations.
It's about being honest and setting clear expectations, even if it feels uncomfortable in the moment.
Exactly.
And I imagine those conversations with family members can be even more delicate. What advice do you have for navigating those?
Those situations can be particularly delicate, but the same principles apply. It's important to communicate your boundaries clearly and respectfully.
Yeah.
It's not about shutting them out. It's about setting healthy limits.
Yeah.
You could say something like, I love you and I want to be there for you, but I also need some time for myself. It's about finding a compromise that works for both parties.
And it's important to remember that you're not obligated to get into guilt trips or pressure tactics.
Right.
Standing your ground can be tough, but it's essential for maintaining healthy boundaries in relationships.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the benefits of saying no more often.
Okay.
What are some of the positive outcomes we can expect to see in our lives?
For starters, you'll likely notice a decrease in stress and overwhelm.
Okay.
When you're not constantly stretching yourself thin, you have more mental and emotional bandwidth to handle life's challenges. It's like a weight lifted off your shoulders.
Right.
And with that newfound time and energy, you can start focusing on things that truly bring you joy and fulfillment. Whether it's spending time with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, or simply relaxing and recharging.
Those are all fantastic benefits.
Yeah.
It sounds like saying no can really open up space for more joy and meaning in our lives.
Absolutely.
And I imagine it also has a positive impact on our self-esteem.
Absolutely. As you practice setting boundaries and prioritizing your well-being,
Yeah.
you'll likely notice a boost in your self-confidence and self-respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's empowering to take ownership of our lives and make choices that align with our values.
Right.
And as you become more comfortable saying no,
Yeah.
you'll find that it becomes easier to identify and pursue opportunities that truly excite you.
Okay.
It's like opening yourself up to a whole new world of possibilities.
That's such an inspiring thought. It sounds like saying no isn't just about avoiding things.
Right.
It's about making space for things that we really want to say yes to.
Exactly.
But I imagine that for some people, the idea of saying no more often can feel daunting. It's a big shift in mindset for sure.
It is.
Where do we even begin?
You're right. It can feel overwhelming at first, but the key is to start small. You don't have to go from saying yes to everything to saying no to everything overnight.
Okay.
Start by practicing saying no in low-stakes situations. Maybe it's declining a social invitation that doesn't really appeal to you.
Right.
Or politely refusing to take on an extra task at work when you're already feeling stretched.
So it's about taking baby steps and building up our no muscle, so to speak.
Exactly.
And I imagine that as we start to see the positive results of setting boundaries, it'll become easier and more natural over time.
Absolutely. As you gain confidence and see the positive impact of saying no, you'll find it becomes easier to do in more challenging situations.
Yeah.
It's like anything else in life, practice makes perfect.
Right.
And remember, it's okay to stumble along the way. Saying no is a skill that takes time and effort to develop. The important thing is to keep practicing and to be patient with yourself.
That's such great advice. It's a reminder that we don't have to be perfect at this.
Yeah.
We just need to be willing to keep learning and growing.
Absolutely. It's all about recognizing that no is not a rejection of the person making the request,
Right.
but rather a protection of our own time, energy, and well-being. It's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is where my personal space begins, and that space deserves to be honored and respected.
You mentioned earlier that the way in which we say no can make a big difference. Could you elaborate on that?
Of course. It's all about finding the right tone and language that conveys both assertiveness and kindness. We want to be clear about our boundaries without coming across as harsh or dismissive. It's a delicate balance to strike, for sure.
Yeah.
But with a little practice, it becomes much easier.
So how do we strike that balance?
Yeah.
What are some practical tips for saying no in a way that's both effective and respectful?
One helpful tip is to start by acknowledging the request and expressing appreciation for the person thinking of you.
Okay.
So instead of just saying no outright, we could say something like, thank you for asking, but... That simple acknowledgement goes a long way in softening the message and maintaining a positive rapport. It shows that we're not rejecting the person, but simply declining the request.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about showing that you've heard them and that
Yeah.
you value their request, even if you're not able to fulfill it. What about situations where we feel pressured to say yes? Like when a colleague asks for help on a project. Those can be really tough, especially if we're worried about appearing unhelpful or unwilling to be a team player.
Those situations can be tricky,
Yeah.
but it's important to remember that you have the right to decline requests that would overextend you or compromise your own work.
Right.
It's not about being selfish. It's about being realistic about your capacity and honoring your commitments.
So how do we handle those situations gracefully? What are some things we could say?
One approach you could try is to express your willingness to help, in principle, but explain that your current workload prevents you from taking on anything else right now. You could say something like, I'd love to help, but my plate is already full at the moment. Perhaps I could take a look at it next week when things calm down a bit.
That's a great suggestion. It shows that you're willing to help, but also sets a clear boundary. What are some other ways to say no in a professional setting?
You could also offer to help in a more limited capacity. Perhaps you could review their work or brainstorm ideas,
Right.
but you can't commit to taking on the entire project.
It's about finding a compromise that respects both your boundaries and their needs.
Exactly. And sometimes the best compromise is to simply say no. It's important to remember that you're not obligated to say yes to everything,
Right.
even in a professional setting.
Now let's talk about personal relationships, which can be even more emotionally charged when it comes to saying no. It can be so hard to disappoint our loved ones, especially when they're asking for our support.
I completely understand. It's natural to want to help our friends and family, but it's crucial to remember that true friends and family will respect your need to set boundaries. It's not about pushing them away. It's about taking care of our own well-being so we can show up as our best selves in all areas of our lives.
It's so easy to get caught up in trying to please everyone and end up feeling completely depleted. Sometimes saying no is actually the kindest thing we can do for ourselves and for those we care about.
Mm.
Is there a way to explain that to loved ones who might not understand?
Absolutely. It's important to have open and honest conversations about boundaries and why they are important. You could explain that when you're constantly overextending yourself and sacrificing your own needs,
Right.
you're not truly present for anyone, not even yourself. You become resentful and depleted, which can negatively impact your relationships. By saying no when necessary,
Yeah.
you're creating space to recharge and replenish your energy so you can show up more authentically and genuinely in your interactions with others.
That's a great point. It's like filling our own cup first so we have something to pour from.
Exactly. And when we model healthy boundaries, it can even inspire those around us to do the same.
Now, I know that for some people, the thought of saying no more often can trigger feelings of guilt or anxiety.
Yeah.
It's like we've been conditioned to believe that saying yes is always the right thing to do.
It's a deeply ingrained societal message,
Yeah.
but it's one that we need to challenge because the truth is saying no is not about being selfish or unkind. It's about honoring our own needs and respecting our limitations. And when we start prioritizing our own well-being,
Right.
we're actually setting a positive example for others.
It shows them that it's okay to set boundaries and that taking care of themselves is important.
Mm-hmm.
And when we all start doing that, we create a more balanced and harmonious world.
I couldn't agree more. It all starts with recognizing our own worth and the value of our time and energy.
So let's talk about some practical tips for saying no gracefully and effectively.
Oh.
What are some strategies that people can use in different situations?
One helpful strategy is to have a few go-to phrases in mind that you can use in different situations. For example, for a social invitation, you can't attend. You could say, "Thank you so much for the invite, but I won't be able to make it this time. I hope you have a wonderful time."
That's simple, straightforward, and polite. What about those situations where a colleague asks you to take on an additional task?
You could say something like, "I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm already swamped with my current workload. Perhaps I could take a look at it when things calm down a bit."
That's honest and assertive, without being rude or dismissive. It's about setting clear boundaries while maintaining a positive relationship. What other tips do you have?
Remember, it's okay to be brief. You don't need to over-explain or justify your decision. Just a clear and polite no will do. And if you're feeling uncomfortable,
Right.
it's okay to take a moment to collect your thoughts before responding. There's no need to rush into a decision.
Sometimes we need a moment to process and gather our thoughts before we can respond effectively, especially if it's a situation that catches us off guard.
Exactly. You can always say something like, "Let me think about that and get back to you." That gives you some breathing room to consider your options and formulate a response that feels authentic and aligned with your needs.
Another helpful tip is to focus on the positive aspects of saying no. Right.
Absolutely. Instead of dwelling on what you're missing out on, think about the benefits you're gaining by declining the request. Maybe it's having more time for yourself, for your loved ones, or for pursuing your passions. Reframing your thinking in this way
Right.
can make saying no feel less like a deprivation and more like an act of self-care.
It's about choosing what truly matters to us and prioritizing those things. It's about making conscious choices that align with our values and goals.
Now, I want to emphasize that saying no is not a one-time fix. It's an ongoing practice that requires mindfulness and effort. It's about building a new habit, a new way of relating to ourselves and to the world.
And as with any new habit, there will be times when we slip up or feel uncomfortable. We might give in to pressure or feel guilty, but it's important to remember that it's all part of the learning process.
Right. The important thing is to keep practicing, to be patient with ourselves, and to celebrate our progress. Because even small steps in the direction of setting healthy boundaries
Yeah.
can have a significant impact on our overall well-being.
It's about making gradual changes and being kind to ourselves along the way.
Yeah.
We don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep moving in the right direction. We've been having such an insightful conversation about the power of saying no and how it can truly transform our lives.
It's been a fascinating discussion, and I hope our listeners are starting to see that saying no is not about being negative or selfish,
Right.
but rather about taking control of our lives and creating a more balanced and fulfilling existence.
It appears that a lot of people struggle with guilt or anxiety when they think about saying no more often. But we've talked about how it's actually an act of self-care and can even strengthen our relationships by allowing us to show up more authentically.
Exactly. When we set healthy boundaries and prioritize our own well-being, we have more energy and enthusiasm to give to the people and things that truly matter to us.
So as we wrap up this episode, what are some key takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember about the power of saying no?
Well, first and foremost, remember that it's okay to say no. It's not selfish, it's not rude, it's simply an act of self-preservation.
Hmm.
It's about recognizing that our needs and limits are just as important as anyone else's.
And it's about giving ourselves permission to make choices that align with our values and priorities, even if those choices mean saying no to something or someone.
Absolutely. You don't need to over-explain or apologize when you say no. A simple, polite no is often sufficient.
Right.
It's about being assertive and standing firm in your decision while also being respectful of the other person's feelings.
It appears that a lot of people get caught up in trying to come up with elaborate excuses or justifications when a simple no would suffice.
Right.
It's about trusting that the people who truly care about us will understand and respect our need to set boundaries.
Exactly. And if you're feeling hesitant or guilty about saying no, remind yourself of the benefits it brings.
Yeah.
Think about the time and energy you'll gain, the stress you'll reduce, and the opportunities you'll open yourself up to.
It's about shifting your perspective and seeing no as a positive choice rather than a negative one. It's about embracing the freedom that comes with setting boundaries and prioritizing your own well-being.
And don't forget that practice makes perfect. Start by saying no in small, low-stakes situations and gradually work your way up to more challenging ones. Maybe it's declining a social invitation that doesn't really appeal to you, or saying no to an extra task at work when you're already feeling overwhelmed.
It's about building that muscle memory and becoming more comfortable with asserting your needs and limits. And remember, it's okay to stumble along the way. We all make mistakes and have moments where we might give in to pressure or feel guilty about saying no.
The important thing is to keep practicing, to be patient with yourself, and to celebrate your progress. Because even small steps in the direction of setting healthy boundaries can have a significant impact on your overall well-being.
And remember, you're not alone in this. We all struggle with saying no at times. But with awareness practice and self-compassion, we can all master this essential skill.
It's a journey, not a destination. So be kind to yourself along the way and trust that each no you say is a step towards a more authentic and empowered life.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
The pleasure was all mine. I hope our listeners feel inspired to embrace the power of no and create a life that truly reflects their values and priorities.
To our listeners, we hope you found this episode helpful and empowering. Remember, saying no is a gift you give to yourself and to those around you. It's about honoring your needs, respecting your limits, and creating a life that feels truly aligned with your authentic self. So, until next time, take care.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more English learners like you. By subscribing, you'll never miss a new episode, and by liking the video, you're letting us know you want more helpful content. Thank you for your support. It means so much to us.